I swear my heart actually stopped when I opened the apartment door and saw him standing in the kitchen. Because the guy leaning against my counter, holding a mug like he owned the place, was the same guy I had kissed at that stupid house party 3 weeks ago. The same guy I had panicked on. The same guy I had literally run away from. And now he was my new roommate. Let me back up. 3 weeks earlier, my friend dragged me to this off-campus party. I didn't even want to go. I had just gotten out of something messy. I was tired of pretending I didn't catch feelings too fast, and honestly, I just wanted to stay home and play FIFA. But of course I went. The house was packed. Too loud. Too sweaty. That mix of cheap beer and cologne hanging in the air. I was halfway through my second drink when I noticed him. Tall. Broad shoulders. Dark hair that kept falling into his eyes. He wasn't loud like the other guys. He stood near the kitchen island, talking to someone but scanning the room like he didn't quite belong there either. Our eyes met for a second. Then again. Then he smirked. I looked away first. Obviously. I found out his name was Carson about 20 minutes later when we both reached for the last beer in the cooler. Our fingers brushed. He laughed and let me have it. "Keep it," he said. "You look like you need it more than I do." His voice was low. Calm. Teasing without sounding cocky. I should have just taken the beer and walked away. Instead, we started talking. And it felt easy. Like we'd already met somewhere before. We stood too close in that crowded kitchen. His arm brushed mine every time someone pushed past us. He asked questions that actually felt like he cared about the answers. "What's your name?" he asked. "Bennett." He repeated it slowly, like he was testing it out. "Bennett." The way he said it did something to my stomach. We ended up outside on the back porch because it was quieter. There were fairy lights strung along the railing, music thumping through the walls, people laughing somewhere in the yard. I don't even remember what we were talking about when it shifted. I just remember the look. That pause. That split second where you know something's about to happen and you can either step forward or step back. He stepped closer. "Can I try something?" he asked, softer now. I should have said no. Not because I didn't want it, but because I knew myself. Instead, I nodded. And then he kissed me. It wasn't sloppy. It wasn't rushed. It was warm and slow and confident in a way that made my brain completely short-circuit. His hand slid to my waist. Mine gripped the front of his shirt without me even thinking about it. I could taste beer and mint. And for about 10 perfect seconds, the world disappeared. Then my panic kicked in. Because that's what I do. The second it felt real, really real, I pulled back. He looked confused. "Hey, you okay?" I wasn't. I wasn't okay with how fast my heart was beating or how badly I wanted him to kiss me again. I wasn't okay with how exposed I felt standing there under those stupid fairy lights. So I did the worst possible thing. "I shouldn't have done that," I muttered. And I walked away. Actually, no. I practically ran. I didn't look back. I didn't grab my jacket. I texted my friend that I wasn't feeling well and Ubered home like a coward. He texted me once that night. "Unknown number, did I do something wrong?" I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I didn't respond. And that was that. Or so I thought. Fast forward 3 weeks. My old roommate had moved out unexpectedly, and I was desperate. Rent in this city isn't forgiving, and I couldn't cover it alone. So when my landlord said he found someone to take the spare room, I didn't argue. "Nice guy," he'd said. "Quiet. Good job. You'll get along. Cool. Great." I had just come back from the grocery store when I walked into the apartment and saw a suitcase by the couch. Then I heard a voice from the kitchen. "You must be Bennett." I froze. Because I knew that voice. Slowly, I stepped around the corner. And there he was. Carson. Same dark hair. Same steady eyes. Except this time. There was no smirk. Just shock mirroring my own. For a second, neither of us said anything. You've got to be kidding me, I finally said. He huffed out a quiet laugh, running a hand through his hair. I was about to say the same thing. My brain was scrambling. You're the new roommate? Yeah. Of course he was. Of course the universe has that kind of humor. We stood there in the most painfully awkward silence of my life. So, he said carefully, you live here? Yes, Carson. I live here. That's usually how being a roommate works. His lips twitched despite himself. Right. Sorry. I dropped my grocery bags on the counter a little harder than necessary. This is wow. Yeah. Another pause. I could feel everything from that night rushing back. The porch. The kiss. The text I never answered. He cleared his throat. Look, about the party. You don't have to. I cut him off quickly. Because if he apologized, I'd feel worse. And if he didn't apologize, I'd feel worse in a different way. I kind of handled that badly, he said anyway. I blinked. You handled it badly? I pushed. You weren't ready. I shouldn't have. No. I shook my head. You didn't push. I just freak out. That's my thing. He studied me for a second, like he was trying to figure me out all over again. So, he said slowly, what do we do now? That question hung in the air. Because this wasn't just some random guy from a party anymore. This was the guy whose bedroom was apparently across the hall from mine. The guy I'd kissed and ghosted. The guy who now shared my kitchen, my couch, my space. I swallowed. We live together, I said finally. Like normal adults. His jaw tightened just slightly. And the other thing? I forced a shrug. What other thing? His eyes didn't leave mine. The fact that you kissed me like you meant it, and then disappeared. My heart did that stupid, traitorous thump again. I looked away first this time. We'll pretend that didn't happen, I said. He was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, he said eventually, voice softer than before. If that's what you want. I nodded. Because pretending felt safer. But as I stood there, hyper-aware of the way he filled the kitchen space, of how close he was, of how easily I remembered the feel of his mouth on mine, I already knew one thing. Pretending was going to be impossible. And living with Carson? It was about to make everything a whole lot harder. Living with Carson started weird. Not dramatic weird. Not explosive weird. Just, quietly, painfully weird. The kind of weird where nothing happens, but everything feels like it could. The first week was basically a masterclass in avoidance. Our apartment wasn't huge, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, open kitchen and living room, which meant avoiding each other required Olympic-level timing. If I heard his door open, I stayed in mine. If I was in the kitchen and heard his keys, I suddenly remembered something very important in my bedroom. It was stupid. And we both knew it. But neither of us called it out. Carson moved in fast. By the second day, his stuff was unpacked, his shoes lying neatly by the door, his coffee mug already claimed a permanent spot beside mine in the cabinet. That tiny detail bothered me more than it should have. Because it felt domestic. Like he belonged here. Which made the memory of that kiss even harder to ignore. I caught myself watching him sometimes. Not intentionally. Just noticing. He hummed when he cooked. Always something low and tuneless. He worked from home 3 days a week, sitting at the dining table with headphones on, occasionally rubbing the back of his neck when he got stressed. He laughed quietly at his phone. He watered the plant I kept forgetting about. Normal things. Dangerous things. Because normal meant comfortable. And comfortable meant feelings had space to grow. One Tuesday night, I came home late from work, exhausted and socially drained. All I wanted was a shower and mindless scrolling until I passed out. But when I stepped inside, the apartment smelled amazing. Garlic. Butter. Something roasting. Carson stood at the stove, back to me. Stirring a pan. Oh, I said before I could stop myself. He turned slightly surprised. Hey! The tension hit immediately. Not awkward enough to be unbearable, but present enough that neither of us relaxed. That smells good, I added. He hesitated for a second. I made too much. You want some? A simple offer. A dangerous offer. I should have said no. Yeah, I said. We ate at the small table across from each other like two people on a very low-budget first date. So, he said after a few minutes, work okay? Yeah. Busy. He nodded. Same. Silence again. I stabbed a piece of pasta harder than necessary. We're bad at this. His mouth curved slightly. Yeah. We are. I exhaled. I don't want the apartment to feel tense. Me either. Another pause, but softer this time. So maybe we just talk? He suggested. I looked up. And there it was again, that steady, careful gaze from the party. The one that felt like he was listening even before I spoke. I didn't run away because of you, I said quietly. I figured. I just get in my head. When something feels good, I assume it'll go wrong. Carson leaned back slightly, processing that. That sounds exhausting. I laughed under my breath. It is. He picked at his food for a moment before speaking again. I didn't text you again because I didn't want to pressure you. That surprised me. You could have, I said. He shrugged. Didn't want to be another thing you had to run from. That landed harder than I expected. I swallowed. You weren't. Our eyes met. And suddenly the table felt too small. I meant what I asked that night, he said softly. I wanted to try something. My heart started doing that annoying fast thing again. Why? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he smiled, but it wasn't playful, it was almost shy. You were easy to talk to. You looked at me like you actually saw me. And I kept thinking about kissing you the whole time we were outside. My face heated instantly. That's very direct. I'm bad at pretending. I laughed quietly. I'm very good at it. He studied me for a second. I don't think you are, he said. That moment stretched. Charged but quiet. Then my phone buzzed loudly on the table, breaking it. I grabbed it too fast. Sorry, work thing. It wasn't. Just a group chat meme. But the spell was broken anyway. We finished dinner more casually after that, talking about shows, work complaints, random apartment things. The air felt lighter, like something important had shifted. Later that night, I was brushing my teeth when Carson knocked softly on the bathroom door frame. Hey, he said. Hey. He leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets. I'm glad you didn't say no to dinner. I rinsed my mouth, suddenly aware of how close he was. Me too. Another one of those pauses. You know, he said carefully, we don't have to pretend it didn't happen. My pulse jumped. I met his eyes in the mirror. I'm not saying we rush into anything, he continued. Just, we don't erase it. The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. I turned to face him fully. That kiss messed with my head, I admitted. His eyebrows lifted slightly. In a good way, I added quickly. Relief flickered across his face. So where does that leave us? He asked. I thought about it. About the way living with him already felt easier. About dinner. About how I hadn't felt this calm around someone in a long time. Maybe, I said slowly, we start with not running away. A small smile spread across his face. I can work with that. We stood there for a second longer than necessary. Close enough to remember. But not close enough to repeat it. Yet. And when I went to bed that night, staring at the ceiling, one realization kept looping in my head. Running into Carson at that party had felt like chaos. But living with him? That felt like the beginning of something. And that scared me even more. After that bathroom conversation, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a, we're suddenly all over each other kind of way. It was smaller than that. But heavier. Carson stopped avoiding eye contact. I stopped pretending I didn't notice when his arm brushed mine in the kitchen. We didn't talk about labels. We didn't define anything. But there was this quiet understanding now. We weren't strangers who'd shared a kiss anymore. We were two guys who had almost started something. And were now standing right on the edge of it. The first real crack in my self-control happened on a Thursday night. It had been a long week. I was drained, irritated, and honestly a little lonely in that way you don't admit out loud. Carson was on the couch when I walked in, wearing gray sweatpants and a worn black t-shirt, one ankle resting over his knee. He glanced up. "You look like you want to punch something." "Accurate." He muted the TV. "Rough day?" I dropped my bag by the door. "Client canceled the project after I already did half the work. No pay. That's messed up." "Yeah." He watched me for a second, then patted the couch beside him. "Sit." It wasn't bossy. It wasn't commanding. It was just steady. I don't know why I listened. But I did. I sat down, closer than necessary. Our thighs almost touching. Carson leaned back, turning slightly toward me. "You gonna spiral about it all night?" I gave him a look. "Obviously." He smiled faintly. "Or you could not." "Wow. Revolutionary." He nudged my leg with his knee. "Hey. You're good at what you do. One bad client doesn't change that." That small gesture, the knee against mine, sent a warm current through me. I tried to ignore it. "I hate when things feel unstable," I admitted quietly. "Yeah? Yeah. I like knowing where I stand." He studied me for a second, something thoughtful in his expression. "You don't like uncertainty." "Nope." He leaned a little closer. "That must make living with me fun." My stomach flipped. "Why would you say that?" "Because I'm pretty sure I count as uncertain." I let out a slow breath. "You do." He didn't pull away. "Do you want me to?" he asked softly. That question hit deeper than I expected. Because this wasn't about the kiss anymore. It was about the fact that he was right here. In my space. In my life. And I didn't want him to feel temporary. "No," I said honestly. His jaw tightened slightly, like he was holding something back. "Then stop acting like I'm about to disappear," he murmured. I swallowed. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "This. Let something happen without planning the exit." The room felt quieter than it actually was. Carson's gaze dropped briefly to my mouth before returning to my eyes. "You don't have to plan the exit," he said. "You can just stay." My pulse was loud in my ears now. The tension wasn't explosive. It was steady. Thick. Building. I became hyper-aware of how close we were sitting. Of the heat from his leg against mine. Of the way his hand rested casually on the couch between us. "I keep thinking about that night," he admitted. "The party?" My voice came out lower than I intended. "Yeah." I forced myself to hold his gaze. "Me too." He didn't smile this time. He just looked at me like he was asking permission without saying it out loud. My brain was yelling. "Don't rush. Don't mess this up. Don't run." But my body? My body remembered exactly how his mouth had felt. "You're staring," I said quietly. "Yeah. You gonna do something about it?" There it was. The challenge. His eyebrows lifted slightly, surprised by my tone. "You sure?" he asked. And for once, I didn't hesitate. "Yeah." He moved slowly. Like he was giving me time to change my mind. He reached up, brushing his fingers lightly along my jaw. Not gripping. Not pulling. Just touching. "Tell me if you want me to stop," he said. I nodded. And then he kissed me again. It wasn't rushed like at the party. It wasn't fueled by noise or alcohol or adrenaline. It was deliberate. His hand slid to the side of my neck, thumb resting just below my ear. My hand instinctively grabbed the fabric of his shirt, grounding myself in something solid. The kiss deepened slowly, carefully. And this time? I didn't pull away. I leaned in. My other hand slid up to his shoulder. I felt him exhale against my mouth. Like he'd been holding that breath for weeks. When we finally broke apart, it wasn't because I panicked. It was because we both needed air. His forehead rested lightly against mine. "You didn't run," he whispered. I let out a shaky laugh. I noticed. His hand slid down, resting at my waist now. "You okay?" he asked. I searched myself for the usual fear. The usual urge to escape. But all I felt was warmth. And something dangerously close to relief. "Yeah," I said softly. "I am." He smiled, not smug, not triumphant. Just happy. And as we sat there on that couch, legs tangled slightly, breathing still uneven, I realized something I hadn't admitted before. I wasn't scared of Carson. I was scared of how much I wanted him. And now that I'd finally stopped running, there was no pretending left between us. The weirdest part after kissing Carson on the couch wasn't the kiss itself. It was what came after. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden escalation, no awkward scramble to pretend it didn't mean anything. We just stayed there. His arm rested around my waist. My head leaned back against the couch cushion, close enough that I could feel his warmth without touching every second. The TV played some random show either of us watched. It felt quiet. Comfortable. Dangerously comfortable. I kept waiting for the anxiety to kick in, that familiar spiral where my brain would start predicting endings before something even began. But it didn't. Instead, I felt calm. "You're thinking," Carson said softly. I huffed. "I'm always thinking." "Is it bad thinking?" I turned my head to look at him. "No," I admitted. "That's the problem." His mouth curved slightly. "I'll take that as a compliment." Silence settled again, but it wasn't awkward. Just full. After a minute, I sat up a little, my hand still loosely gripping the hem of his shirt like I hadn't realized I was doing it. "So what now?" I asked. Carson leaned his head back against the couch, eyes on the ceiling. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I don't want to rush you. But I also don't want to act like that meant nothing." "Same." He glanced at me. "We could just see where it goes." That phrase usually terrified me. But coming from him, it felt less like uncertainty and more like patience. "I can do that," I said. His smile was small but real. "Good." We ended up watching an actual episode of something after that, though I couldn't tell you what it was about. My brain was too busy replaying the last 20 minutes on loop. The way he touched my jaw. The softness of that second kiss. The way he checked if I was okay afterward. That part stuck with me the most. Because Carson wasn't intense in a chaotic way. He was steady. And I didn't realize how much I needed steady until he showed up. The next morning felt surreal. I woke up half expecting the previous night to feel distant or awkward in daylight. Instead, I walked into the kitchen to find Carson making coffee like nothing had exploded between us. "Morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Morning." I hovered by the counter for a second, suddenly unsure what the rules were now. Roommates? Something else? Carson seemed to notice. He slid a mug toward me. "No overthinking before caffeine," he said. I laughed. Impossible request. But I took the mug. We stood side by side, sipping coffee in comfortable quiet. Our shoulders brushed once when he reached for the sugar, and neither of us pulled away. Tiny things? But they mattered. "You busy today?" he asked. "Just emails and a call." He nodded. "I've got meetings most of the afternoon." Another pause. Then, casually, almost too casually, his fingers tapped lightly against the back of my hand resting on the counter. Not grabbing. Not holding. Just there. I glanced down at the contact, then back up at him. "You're bold in the morning," I said. He smirked slightly. "Testing the waters." I didn't move my hand. "Water's fine," I said. Something warm flickered across his face. The real moment of realization happened that evening. We were cooking together, which had somehow become a thing without discussion. Music played softly from Carson's phone. Something indie and mellow. I chopped vegetables while he handled the stove. At one point I reached across him for a spice, misjudged the distance, and bumped straight into his chest. "Sorry," I said automatically. But neither of us moved. We just stood there, close enough to feel each other breathing. Carson looked down at me, expression softer than I'd ever seen it. "You're not very good at personal space," he murmured. "Neither are you." His hand rested lightly at my hip, steadying me from the bump that had already passed. But he didn't remove it. And this time, I didn't pretend not to notice. "I keep waiting for this to feel scary," I admitted quietly. "And it doesn't." His thumb brushed once against my side through my shirt, absent-minded, almost. "That good or bad? Terrifying in a different way." He smiled faintly. "Because it matters." I nodded. There it was. The truth I'd been circling. This wasn't just attraction. It wasn't just convenience or proximity or unfinished tension from a party. It mattered. Carson's gaze softened even more, like he understood exactly what I hadn't said out loud. "That's okay," he said. My chest tightened a little. "How are you so calm about this?" I asked. He shrugged lightly. "Because I liked you before you ran away. I liked you when you avoided me. And I still like you now that you're standing in my kitchen stealing my spices." I laughed, cheeks warming. "That's a strong foundation." "Very." We stayed like that for another quiet second before he finally stepped back to stir the pan. But the air felt different now. Lighter. Certain. Later that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, phone in my hand, replaying the day. The touches. The smiles. The way nothing felt forced. And a realization hit me so clearly it almost made me laugh. 3 weeks ago, I ran from Carson because I was scared of what one kiss might mean. Now, I was falling asleep in the next room from him. And hoping this was only the beginning. If living together had been step 1, and kissing on the couch had been step 2, then step 3 was realizing we couldn't keep pretending this was casual. It happened on a Saturday. Of course it did. Because Saturdays are dangerous. Too much free time. Too much space for feelings to stretch out and get comfortable. Carson had been up before me. I could smell coffee drifting down the hallway. I dragged myself out of bed in sweatpants and walked into the kitchen half asleep. He looked up from the stove. And smiled. Not the small, careful smile he'd been giving me all week. A full one. "Morning," he said. My chest did that stupid tight thing again. "Morning." He handed me a mug without asking how I took it. That tiny detail hit harder than it should have. "You made breakfast?" I asked. "Figured we deserved something better than cereal." "We." The word lingered in the air. I sat at the counter while he flipped pancakes like this was the most normal thing in the world. The sunlight coming through the windows caught in his hair, and I caught myself staring again. "You're doing it," he said without looking at me. "Doing what?" "Thinking too loud." I rolled my eyes. "You're very smug for someone making pancakes." He smirked. "You like it?" Annoyingly. I did. After breakfast, we ended up cleaning the apartment together. Music playing. Windows open. It felt easy in a way I wasn't used to. At one point, I was wiping down the counter while Carson stood beside me drying dishes. Our arms kept brushing. Neither of us moved away. "Bennett," he said casually. "Yeah? Are we going to talk about what this is?" There it was. I stilled slightly. "Do we have to define it right now?" I asked. "I don't need labels today," he said. "I just need to know we're on the same page." I turned toward him. "And what page are you on?" He didn't hesitate. "I'm not seeing anyone else." "I don't want to." My pulse jumped. "I wasn't seeing anyone else before," he continued quieter now. Even after the party. That surprised me. Why? He gave me a look like the answer was obvious. Because I liked you. God. He said it so simply. No dramatics. No hesitation. Just fact. I swallowed. I haven't been seeing anyone either, I admitted. He studied my face carefully, like he was checking for doubt. You sure? He asked softly. Yeah. Silence stretched between us. Then he set the towel down and stepped closer. Then I don't want to pretend this is just convenient, he said. It's not just proximity. I'm not kissing you because you're here. I'm kissing you because it's you. My throat tightened. Because that was exactly what I'd been afraid of. Not that this was meaningless, but that it wasn't. I don't want to mess this up, I said honestly. You don't, he replied. You don't know that. I do. His hand lifted slowly, resting at my waist again, that now familiar spot. Warm. Steady. You're not as reckless as you think, he continued. You just get scared. That landed too accurately. And? I asked quietly. And I don't mind taking it slow. The tension between us shifted, less uncertain, more intentional. So what are we saying? I asked. He looked at me carefully. I'm saying I want to be with you, he said. Not just getting involved. Not seeing what happens. With you. My heart thudded. Living together suddenly felt bigger. Realer. Okay, I said softly. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Okay? Okay, I repeated, firmer this time. I want that too. The relief on his face was immediate. Not dramatic. Just this subtle exhale, like something heavy had been set down. Good, he murmured. Then he kissed me. But this kiss felt different. It wasn't testing. It wasn't tentative. It was intentional. His hand slid up from my waist to my jaw, tilting my face slightly. My hands found his shoulders easily now, like they belonged there. The kiss deepened slowly, naturally. I stepped closer without thinking, pressing into him. He responded instantly, one hand sliding to the small of my back. There was no panic this time. No urge to pull away. Just warmth. When we finally separated, my breathing was uneven, but my head was clear. You still okay? He asked. I laughed softly. Yeah. Still not running? I shook my head. Not running. He rested his forehead against mine again, smiling slightly. You have no idea how relieved I am to hear that. And standing there in our kitchen, sunlight, half-cleaned counters, pancakes still on a plate behind us, I realized something quietly monumental. This wasn't chaos. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't just unfinished business from a party. Carson wasn't just the guy I kissed and ran from. He was becoming the guy I was choosing to stay with. And for the first time in a long time, staying didn't feel scary. It felt right. Being with Carson didn't explode my life. It quietly rearranged it. And somehow, that felt bigger. The first week after we decided to actually be together was strangely normal. We didn't suddenly turn into some over-the-top couple. We still argued about whose turn it was to take the trash out. We still worked at opposite ends of the table some afternoons. But there were differences. Subtle ones. His hand would find my lower back when he passed behind me in the kitchen. I'd sit closer on the couch without thinking about it. He'd press a quick kiss to my temple before heading to the gym like it was the most natural thing in the world. And the crazy part? It felt natural. Almost like we'd skipped the chaotic beginning and landed straight in something steady. But life doesn't let you stay in that bubble forever. The first real test came when my friend Josh invited us to another party. Bring the new roommate, he'd said over the phone. I still feel bad about the last one. I froze at that. Carson, sitting across from me, caught the look on my face. Party? He asked once I hung up. Yeah. He tilted his head slightly. The same place? Same house. Silence. Not tense. Just aware. We don't have to go, he said. I know. I looked at him carefully. You okay with it? I asked. He shrugged lightly. I kissed you there. I'm not traumatized. I laughed under my breath. I ran away there. He smiled softly. You don't have to this time. That simple statement did something to me. Because he wasn't saying it like a challenge. He was saying it like reassurance. We ended up going. Walking into that house again felt surreal. Same loud music. Same sticky floors. Same fairy lights on the porch. But this time? Carson's hand was loosely hooked in mine. Not tight. Not possessive. Just steady. And for the first time, I wasn't scanning the room for exits. Josh greeted us with an exaggerated grin. Look at this. No one's running tonight? I shoved him lightly. Shut up. Carson just smiled, squeezing my hand once before letting go as we stepped further inside. We didn't cling to each other all night. That wasn't us. But we orbited naturally, checking in, brushing shoulders, catching each other's eye from across the room. At one point, we ended up back on the same porch. Same railing. Same fairy lights. Carson leaned against it, looking at me with that familiar steady expression. Full circle, he said. Yeah. I rested my forearms on the railing beside him. You nervous? He asked. I thought about it. 3 weeks ago, standing here, I'd felt exposed. Unprepared. Like something was about to swallow me whole. Now? I'm not, I said honestly. His lips curved slightly. Good. The music thumped through the walls again. People laughed somewhere behind us. Can I try something? He asked softly. I laughed. You're really reusing that line? It worked the first time. It didn't, I reminded him. I ran. He stepped closer, not quite touching me yet. You didn't run this time. And he kissed me. Right there. On the same porch. Under the same lights. But this kiss was different. Confident. Unhurried. Mine. My hands slid to his waist easily now. No hesitation. No panic creeping up my spine. When we pulled apart, there was no confusion in his eyes. Just warmth. You're not disappearing on me after this, right? He asked lightly. I shook my head. I'm literally going home with you. He laughed at that, and the sound felt grounding. Standing there, I realized something quietly huge. The place where I once ran away was now just a place. It didn't hold power over me anymore. Because the fear wasn't in the location. It had been in me. And now? It wasn't winning. Later that night, back in our apartment, we kicked off our shoes and collapsed onto the couch. You did good, Carson murmured. I survived. You stayed. I looked at him. Yeah, I said softly. I stayed. He leaned in, pressing a slower, deeper kiss to my mouth, not fueled by noise or an audience, but by something calmer. Intentional. And as I sat there in the quiet apartment, his hand resting comfortably on my thigh, I realized the biggest shift of all. 3 weeks ago, Carson was a risk. Now, he felt like home. The strange thing about happiness is that you don't always notice when you step into it. There's no dramatic music. No grand realization. Sometimes it just looks like sitting on the couch at midnight, Carson half asleep beside you, your feet tangled together while some random documentary plays in the background. And thinking, oh, this is nice. That was my life now. Not perfect. But nice. And that terrified me less every day. A week after the party, Carson and I fell into a rhythm that felt almost unfairly easy. Morning coffee together. Shared grocery runs. Texts during the day that weren't dramatic, just little check-ins. You eat yet? Don't forget your meeting. There's leftover pasta if you want it. Tiny things. But they built something steady. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet except for the faint sound of Carson talking in his room, work call, from the tone. I dropped my bag and wandered into the kitchen, absent-mindedly opening the fridge. And that's when I noticed it. A sticky note. On the inside of the fridge door. "Don't forget milk," B keeps complaining. I stared at it for a second. Then laughed. Because Carson was the kind of person who left notes. And somehow, without realizing it, I'd become the person those notes were for. That realization lingered with me all evening. Later, Carson joined me on the couch, dropping down beside me with a tired exhale. "Long day?" I asked. "Yeah." I handed him the remote. "Your turn to pick." He didn't grab it. Instead, he looked at me. "You okay?" I frowned slightly. "Yeah." "Why?" "You look like you're thinking again." I smiled faintly. "I found your fridge note." His ears tinted slightly pink. "It was accurate. It was domestic." "That a bad thing?" I leaned back into the couch cushion, considering that. 3 weeks ago, the idea of domestic anything with someone would have made my chest tighten. Now? "No," I said quietly. "It's not." He relaxed beside me. Silence settled, soft, familiar. "Carson," I said after a moment. "Yeah? Do you ever think about how weird this is?" He smiled without looking at me. "That my roommate ghosted me after a kiss and now he steals my hoodies?" I laughed. "Exactly that." He turned his head. "I think it's funny," he said. "And lucky." "Lucky?" "Yeah." His gaze softened. "Because if you hadn't run, we might have just been another party story." That hit me. Because he was right. Sometimes messy beginnings gave you second chances. "I hate that I ran," I admitted. He shook his head immediately. "I don't." I blinked. "You don't?" "No," he said. "Because you came back." My chest tightened a little. "I didn't come back," I said. "You moved in." He smirked. "Details." I nudged him. But his words lingered. "You came back. Maybe not physically. But emotionally. I hadn't stayed closed off. I hadn't hidden forever. And that mattered." The moment that sealed everything happened a few nights later. Nothing dramatic. Just late. I couldn't sleep, so I wandered into the kitchen for water. Carson was already there, leaning against the counter scrolling his phone. "Insomnia Club?" I asked. He smiled. "Something like that." I grabbed a glass, and we stood there in comfortable quiet. "You know," he said eventually, "I've been thinking about something." "That's dangerous." He huffed a laugh. "That night at the party, when you left." I stilled slightly. "I thought I'd scared you off," he admitted. "You didn't." "I know that now." He looked at me. "But back then I figured you were gone for good." There was no accusation in his voice. Just honesty. "I almost was," I admitted softly. His expression didn't change. "Why weren't you?" I thought about that. About the couch. The dinners. The porch. The quiet mornings. About him. "Because you felt different," I said. His gaze sharpened slightly. "How?" "Safe," I answered. The word hung between us. Carson's shoulders dropped just a fraction, like something inside him had loosened. "That's the best compliment I've ever gotten," he murmured. I smiled. And without thinking, I stepped closer, resting my forehead briefly against his shoulder. Not dramatic. Just instinct. His arms wrapped around me easily, like they already knew the shape of me. We stood there like that for a quiet moment. Kitchen light humming. City noise faint outside. Ordinary. But meaningful. "I'm glad you ran," he whispered eventually. I laughed softly against his shirt. "You're the only person who's ever said that." "Because you stopped running." I pulled back, looking at him. And there it was again, that steady look from the party. But now it felt like home. "You know what the craziest part is?" I said. "What?" "I went to that party because I didn't want to be alone that night." He smiled gently. "And?" And I ended up finding the person I want to come home to. Carson didn't say anything right away. He just leaned down and kissed me, soft, lingering, certain. When we parted, his forehead rested against mine. Good, he whispered. And standing there in our quiet kitchen, 3 weeks after a kiss I ran from, I finally understood something simple and undeniable. Sometimes the right story doesn't start perfectly. Sometimes it starts with panic, with mistakes, with running. But if you're lucky, you get another chance to walk back, knock on the door, and stay. And this time, I wasn't going anywhere.